Hello, today I'm going to show the configuration that I use for debuggers in neovim and what you can do with it. So if you want to follow along, or if you want to test the same configuration, you can run these commands that I'm going to run, because I'm going to use the same configuration, like a simplified configuration that I have in my GitHub. So I'm going to move my current configuration. This is just to check if my current configuration is there. So I have a backup for my current configuration, and then I'm gonna download the configuration that I'm gonna show. And the idea is just to show this simple configuration and what it can do, and then you can adapt this configuration to your configuration and your workflow. So I'm gonna download everything that I need to test this configuration. Now I can open this project, which is like a test project, so you can test the debugger. And I'm gonna open a file here, and to install everything that you need to install to test this configuration, now you just need to run packer sync, and that's gonna install everything that you need, and packer compile. Okay, and all these code is in the documentation of the configuration, and also I'm gonna put this on the video description. Now I can restart Vim, and now I can start using the debugger. So the first thing that I'm gonna show is breakpoints. I have like a overall the topics that I want to talk about here and show real quickly. Then I'm gonna show inspecting the values and watching the values, and then I'm gonna show the configuration and what you need to change and how you can adapt this configuration to your current Vim configuration. Okay, so first thing, to start the debugger, you can press in this configuration, right? I'm just gonna show the hotkeys that I have for this configuration, and then you can change the hotkeys if you want. So in my configuration, to start the debugger, you can type my leader, which is space gs. So space gs is gonna start the debugger, and you're gonna be presented with three options, like debug current file, run rspec current file, and run rspec current file current line. In this case, we are not like using rspec, so I'm just gonna run this file. So I can press 1, enter, and I'm gonna run the debugger on this file. So the debugger stopped on the debugger keyword. To toggle breakpoints, I can press space dt. So now I created a breakpoint on this a variable. I can press space dt again to remove the breakpoint. So if I created a breakpoint here, now I can press space gc to continue. So now the debugger stopped on this line. And I can keep doing this, right? Like if I go to this list creator, which is the next thing that is being called on this code, the code doesn't matter, it's just to show the configuration. So if I can create another breakpoint here, right? So now if I press space dc, I'm gonna stop on this line, which is in the start method. I'm just gonna create one more breakpoint so I can show how we can jump between the frames. So if I go to the linked list, you can see here that eventually I'm gonna call remove on this linked list. So I'm gonna go to the linked list, I'm gonna go to remove, and I'm gonna create another breakpoint here. If I go back, the execution is on this line, right? You can tell which line the execution is on by the little arrow thing. And if I continue now, I'm gonna jump to the next breakpoint. So if I type space dc again, I jump to the next breakpoint that I just created. So now I have multiple breakpoints in multiple files. I can list all the breakpoints that I have with space db. So space db shows all the breakpoints that I have in all the different files. This listing is a search, is a fuzzy search. So I can start typing here, and I can filter the breakpoints. So imagine if I had 20 breakpoints. I could easily list them here and jump between them, because if I press enter now, I'm gonna jump to that selection. So I jumped to this breakpoint. So if I press enter again, I'm gonna jump between the endpoints that I searched and selected on that view. Besides that, let me go back to the last endpoint. So it's this endpoint in the linked list. So besides listing the breakpoints and jumping between them, I can also jump between the frames, so I can go back in the execution. So I can press space GJ and space GK, and I can jump up or down in the stack frame. So if I keep pressing space DJ, I'm gonna go to the first breakpoint, and if I press space GK, I'm gonna go down in the stack frames. And you can see that I can evaluate the variables in each stack frame when I do that. For example, if I have these values here, right? So these are the local variables on this frame. And if I press space GJ, right, to go up, now these values change, right? Because these are the values on this frame. Let me go back to my points so I don't forget to show anything. So besides the searching breakpoints and jumping between them, you can also go up and down the stack frames. We can clear the breakpoints. So I'm gonna show the conditional breakpoints now. But before I do that, I want to clear all the breakpoints that I have right now. So to do that, I can type space GX, uppercase X, and that's gonna remove all breakpoints. So now if I list the breakpoints, I don't have any breakpoints anymore. So it doesn't even show the list. And I can restart the code with space GA. So that's gonna restart everything. So I have this is huge, at least for me, like the fact that I can easily add and remove all breakpoints and restart everything. It's super useful when you are debugging or writing any code. So I can restart everything, and now I'm gonna show how to create conditional breakpoints, because conditional breakpoints are super useful, especially when you are not sure where the bug is. So with conditional breakpoints, you can jump to a place where a specific state needs to be true, and you can find more easily bugs creating these conditional breakpoints. So I can create a conditional breakpoint on this line, this list swap line, right after the remove line. So to create a conditional breakpoint, I can press space G, uppercase C. Lowercase c is continue, so uppercase C is the conditional breakpoint. So for example, I have a remove here, right? So right after this line, if this remove is actually working, list head next value needs to be 2, right? Because I have a linked list with 1, 2, 3, 4 values. So I removed the value 3. So now the second value, not the second value, the third value, right? Like the third value needs to be, this is the second value, this is the third value. The third value needs to be 4, actually. So I can create this condition here. And when you create the condition, you're gonna see a C instead of a B in that line. And you can also list that conditional breakpoint like you list any other breakpoint. And if I continue now, because now I'm stopped in this line, right? If I continue execution now, I should stop on this line, on this conditional breakpoint, if that's true. If that's not true, it's gonna pass. It's gonna pass right through this execution, and I know that something is wrong, right? Yeah, so I can type space GC now, and it stopped on this line, right? So I know that the invariant that I'm thinking about, the condition that I'm thinking about is true, at least on this line. And I can keep doing this to verify where the code is breaking a specific state. Okay, so that's also super useful. Let me go back to my script so I know what things I need to talk about. I already show restarting, already show conditional breakpoints. Now I'm going to show all the ways that you can inspect the values. Conditional breakpoints is a way of inspecting the values, but we have like specific ways of inspecting the values, at least that I use, that are also really useful. So one of them is, let me go back again. So I'm here starting everything again. One of the ways that I have to inspect the values is just showing the values besides the variable. So if I continue here, you can see that you can tell the value here, right? On these two variables. Like in this case, it doesn't matter, right? Because you are creating the variables here. But if you wasn't creating the variables here, you can still inspect those values. Like for example, if I create a breakpoint here, and if I continue, now I know the value of the variable value, which is 3, right? And it's a pretty easy way to see the value of the variables and understand what is happening. So besides that, I also have the panel here, right? Like I have this panel which has all the variables and the values, and also the global variables. This is like pretty standard for any debugger. And like the other thing that I use is that sometimes it's hard to see the values that you need to see. For example, especially if it is an object, right? Like I have this doubly linked list object, and I don't know I just have this weird information about like the memory and things like that, right? Like I don't have the actual value of this variable, so it's hard to debug because I'm not actually seeing the values. So one way that you can make it easier to debug something like this is actually creating watch expressions. So if I go back here, so let's say I want to debug this remove again, right? Like I want to understand if this remove is doing, this remove and also the swap is doing what it's supposed to do. I'm going to remove all the breakpoints again so I can show this. So I can remove all breakpoints with space D, uppercase X. And now I'm going to create some watch expressions here. For example, I want to know the values of each element in the linked list, right? So I want to know list head value. I want to know this value at all times. I want to know list head next value. I want to know list head next value, which is the third value, and the fourth value, right? Read, in this case, right, because I have 4 elements. Next value. Okay, so right now, all these values are undefined because I'm in the beginning of the execution, right? I can also close this. Let's close this just so it's easier to see the values here. So I can restart everything. So I'm gonna restart everything with, again, space GA. So I restarted everything. I can see that it stopped in the debugger here. Let me close this again. And now I can go to the linked list, not linked list, the list creator, and I can add a debugger here, and I can continue. So now I can see the values in the watch in a much more clear way, right? What is happening, right? Because now I can see that head value is 1, head next value is 2, head next value is 3, and so forth. So now if I step over to this next line, I can see if the removed works as expected or not. So, I'm going to also show how to move over. So to move over one line, you press space GO. And I can see that now, let me close this. Now I can see now that I actually removed the third value, so this implementation of a linked list is actually working. And I can also move again and see if the swap is working or not. So I can again do space GO, not big O, small O, space GO, and I can see how the linked list behaved, right? So I can see that now the fourth value is the first item in the linked list, and the last value is the number 1, right? So I swapped these values. Okay, I think that's pretty much all that I want to show that I use for debugging. The next thing that I'm going to show is the configuration and how the configuration works and what you can change and how you can use this configuration, adapt this configuration to your configuration. So yeah. Okay, now I'm going to show the configuration and how to adapt it and how to change it and how it works. One thing that I forgot to show in the last video was the repo. So I'm going to show this really quickly now. So to open, I'm going to create a breakpoint here. I'm going to continue, and to open a repo we just need to press space GR. So space GR opens the repo, and you can do anything here, right? Like you can spec the values of the variables, you can run a piece of code, anything that you want. And that's pretty much the only thing that I forgot to show in the last video. So now I'm going to show the configuration. So the configuration is here. Let me stop this. And it's pretty straightforward. I have some stuff here that is not related to the actual debugger configuration, and you can just ignore this, right? For example, like all this information is not needed, so you don't need node tree, you don't need anything like that. This is like my personal configuration. The only thing that you need to have the debuggers and everything like that is you need tree seeder, so you need this part. I'm gonna put a comment here, like I forgot to do that, but you can ignore this. Ignore this. Let me put ignore this. So let me do it like this. Ignore this start. Ignore this end. So you don't need telescope. Like you can use whatever you want, and yeah, and you don't need this key mapping, right? This is not related to the debuggers. Okay, so besides that, you do need tree seeder, so you do need this. I'm using Packer, and I think Packer is fantastic, but you can use whatever package manager you want. You don't need node tree. I'm using which key, but you can also ignore. Which key pretty much shows, it is an easy way to see the options that you have for key mappings easily, right? If I type space D, it's gonna show all the options that I have for debugging, and I think this is fantastic. It's super useful. Sometimes I forget a key mapping, and then I can easily see all the key mappings that I have here. But if you don't want to use which key, you can just create the key mappings yourself. Okay, so besides that, this is telescope, so you don't need this. Actually, you would need telescope if you want to use that fuzzy searching and when I showed the listing breaking points, you would need telescope for that. And I think telescope is fantastic. So yeah, just install telescope. Yeah, but besides that, you do need tree seeder, and this is, you can ignore this completely. This is like just the color scheme that I was using, and doesn't matter. So this is the interesting part. This is like starting everything that is using the debugging and that configuration that I showed. So these are the plugins that I'm using for the debugging configuration. This virtual text is that thing that I showed that shows the value of the variable right besides like a comment. This DAP UI is that panel. Actually, we have like multiple panels, the repo, the watch panels. It's also a fantastic project. This Nvim DAP Ruby. I actually don't know what this is. Oh, this is my project. So Nvim DAP Ruby is let me go back here. Nvim DAP Ruby is the plugin that I'm using to actually connect the debugger, the Ruby debugger, to neovim. I'm probably gonna make a video explaining this project as well, because it's really simple, and this project is not perfect. and we don't have like a good alternative now, because the other projects that we have also don't let you configure everything that you might want to configure to run a debugger. For example, this project assumes you are using RSpec to run tests. Yeah, and that's not great, right? Like, because you can be using Minitest or any other test framework for Ruby. Yeah, but that's something that I'm gonna probably show during the future. Yeah, so this is virtual text and DAP UI, and this is telescope DAP. This is the thing that shows, for example, all the breakpoints, and you can search the breakpoints and jump between the breakpoints. Okay, so, and this is the start of the configuration. So this is the configuration for the virtual text. There is not much here. It's just like the default configuration, and the default configuration is really great. Okay, so besides that, we have the configuration for the DAP UI. This is important because this is the panels that you're gonna see when you run the debugger. So let me show you, like these panels that you see. The configuration for these panels is this. So you have like, I have two layouts. One of the layouts are showing watches, which is this, and the other layout is showing scopes, which is the other thing, which is this, right? And you can see the name here, right? Like this is DAP scopes, and the other one is DAP watches. Okay, so besides that, this is like some events to open or close those panels. So you can configure this. Like for example, if you don't want to open the UI, like these panels, when you start the debugger, you just remove this, and you're not gonna open automatically. Same thing for closing. Okay, and this is the setup for the My plugin, which does the communication between Ruby and the DAP debuggers. And this is the start of the which key configuration. You can check like details about the configuration of any of these using the help function in Nvim. You can type help. For example, let's say I want to know what I can do with I don't know, DAP UI, right? Like this plugin. I can type help DAP UI, and this I can find all the configuration available for this plugin here, right? And I can search, I can do anything that I want here, and I can use this configuration or not, or understand how this configuration works. So yeah, and the same thing is true for any other plugin that has configuration, right? That has documentation actually, and most of these plugins has documentation. Okay, so which key? It's this thing, right? It's the thing that shows all the key mappings that you have, and you can like namespace the key mappings, right? So for example, all my debugging key maps are inside D, right? So that's why all my debugging key maps start with leader D and something else, right? And these are the actual commands that run when you press that key. So you can change this. You can also like see the help for DAP, because the DAP plugin it does most of the stuff that you saw, and you can see like the configuration and the other options that they have. So like this is, for example, my restart. This is the continue. This is the set breakpoint, which is that conditional breakpoint. And the other stuff that you expect from a debugger, right? Like step into, step over, step up, step down. And this is the stack framing thing, right? Like the J and K going up or down in the stack frames. Yeah, there are some things that I didn't show in the video because I don't use them very much. And yeah, that's why I didn't show them. But you have like a lot of other options in all these plugins, and you can add the configuration that you want here. So this is pretty much it. Like this is the whole configuration to have all those features that I showed, and a lot of these are not even required. So I think you can remove like this. You can remove for sure because this is just a color scheme, and yeah, and node tree as well. I use node tree. I know that node tree is not that great, but it's what I'm using right now. And also these, you can ignore all of this, it doesn't matter. Yeah, that's pretty much it. That's all I had to say about the configuration. And I can show maybe I'm gonna make a video about the adapter, the Ruby adapter that I'm using, this one that I created, because this is still a problem. Like if you are working on a Rails project, this is not a problem because this covers that, because most Rails projects use RSpec, and you can just run one of those options, because this plugin is what defines the options that you see. Let me stop this. So when you type space cds and you choose one of these options, right, that plugin defines which options you have to choose. And you cannot configure these options very much, right? For example, if I don't want to use RSpec, I want to use other thing to run my tests, right? There is no way to do that. Yeah, so I'm gonna probably make a video about that in the future. So that's it. That's pretty much all I wanted to talk about that. So yeah.